Hello and welcome to Delaney Studios YouTube channel. Today I'll be teaching you how to draw this lovely landscape, drawing using pencils. So the tools you will need today. We've got your 2B pencil for starting to draw and getting all your lines in, 4B pencil for any of your grey shading, grey tone, and then 6B for anything really dark or your black tone shading. You've got your smudging sticks or paper stumps. I've got one small one, you can see is quite new, and a large one that is much older. The older they are, the better they work to push around your shadows. And then I've got two types of erasers. I've got my normal white eraser, that's for rubbing out large areas completely. Then I've got my Kneadable rubber, and that's for picking out highlights. If you don't have smudging sticks, you can use a tissue, and if you don't have a Kneadable rubber, you can use a piece of Blutack. So I'm going to zoom in on my piece of paper. We're going to have it portrait and we're going to start to draw. So get your 2B pencil ready and let's begin. Okay, step number one when you're doing a landscape is to find the horizon line. The horizon line is a relatively straight line that separates the ground from the sky or the ground from the mountains. In this case, it will separate the ground from the mountains. So I want you to find about halfway with your 2B pencil. And then I want us to draw a nice, relatively straight line coming across about halfway. You don't have to use a ruler. You can just do this by eye. And it's totally fine if it's wonky. Does not need to be super flat. Step two is we're going to plan the road. Now, this is a bit of a lesson in perspective. So we're trying to make the road look like it's really wide near us because we're standing near it. And then it disappears and gets smaller and smaller as it comes to the horizon line. So I'm going to start at the horizon line and I'm going to do a curved line that comes down and around and then finishes at the bottom of the page. Important thing to remember when we do the other side is it's wide at the bottom and skinny at the top. It looks like it's disappearing off into the distance. Start off skinny, we slowly get wider, follow the same curves. Really wide down here and off the side of the page this time. And that's your road, that's just the basics. The next step is to start planning out the mountains. So what we're going to do first is we're going to pick some peaks of our mountains. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side. Doesn't matter what side you start, you can choose your own shapes of mountains. I'm just doing the top shapes first. It's okay to wobble the edges too, makes it look way more realistic. That's very, very basic mountains. So we're going to start adding some more mountains in and creating some cliffs and extra bits and pieces so we can add shading to it later. So what I'm going to do is extend my second mountain peak. I'm going to extend it down and then I'm going to join it with my first peak, wobble it in. Okay, so we're now going to add in a little bit of an extra mountain on mountain number 3. Let's do some extra detail. So I'm going to just wobble it down to the horizon line. So we're splitting it. It almost looks like a pyramid. I'm going to add another little mountain in here and then I'm going to split mountain number 2 so it looks a bit more realistic. So I'm going to come up and then I'm going to come down. I'm going to create a little bit of a canyon in here and just split this line. Do some little wobbles there because we don't want it perfect. And let's continue this line from mountain 3. Let's join that up with our second little peak there. So starting to look way more realistic now. And I want to add another little mountain here. So I'm just going to come up with a simple wobbly triangle. And then let's split it. And that's our mountains done. So we can move on now to doing the shading, which is nice and straightforward. So I want you to get your 4B pencil together. So I've got my 4B there. And let's just start adding just some basic shading. So what you want to do is hold your pencil really far back because you don't want to use the tip of the pencil. You'll end up pressing too hard and leaving really hard lines, which is not what we want. What we want to do is use the side of the lead, and you just want to do a very gentle colouring motion. We will be using our smudging sticks to smooth all this out too. Just filling in little portions. You can even add a few little soft shaded areas in the mountain because it's not going to be perfectly smooth. We'll add some extra shading lines in them a bit later with a bit of 6B, just so we can get the basics in. Now what we need to do is completely colour the ground here. We're going to be adding lots of bushes and grass and things like that. So what I'd like to do is just very softly add a bit of shading into that. And again, use the side of your lead rather than the tip because it ends up being a bit too liney. Don't worry if you accidentally colour in the road because we'll use our eraser to get rid of those. Definitely does not need to be perfect colouring, just as long as you're getting that lead down, because the smudging stick will do all the smoothing. Again, if you don't have a smudging stick, just use a tissue and wrap it around your finger. Okay, so now I'm going to get my normal eraser and just rub out any little bits that I got over the road. This is why you don't have to be too careful. It's so easy to rub out because we kept all our colouring super soft. And we've got basic shading done in 4B. So we get our smudging stick or tissue. And what we're going to do is always hold my hand on top of it rather than using it like a pencil. So to do that, lay it flat on the table, put your finger near the tip and use your other fingers to pick it up, and it should sit in your palm. So all I want to do is do little circular motions. This is better than doing stripes. If you do a stripy motion, you will actually be left with stripy smudges all over your artwork, which is not what we want. Some little circular motions over the whole mountain, so your mountains will turn grey. And it's picking up the lead that I put down. So if yours is not smudging that great, you may just need to put down a bit of extra 4B because it can only move around what you've put on the piece of paper. And if you went over any lines, you can use Kneadable or normal eraser just to clean up any of those little smudges. And then let's do the same for the grass area either side of the road. This is fine to use it in a horizontal motion because that's the way we've coloured. You can do circular if you prefer. What this is doing is just laying down a base tone for our ground. So you can see the difference. You can see my lines of colouring on the left and you can see how smooth it looks on the right. That's why the smudging sticks, or paper stumps as they call them in the shops, are a really, really great investment if you love drawing. Cleaning up any little edges. Nice and smooth. Now we can come in with our 6B and we're going to start adding our detail. So what we're going to do is add some stripes or flicks of shadow into our mountain. So I'm just going to pick a diagonal direction and pop some little lines in with 6B. In those darker areas of the mountain. I can also add a few little flicks inside these little areas which we darkened up with our 4B earlier, and we will be smudging over those just to soften them a little. It just makes your shadows a little bolder. We're definitely not going for a super realistic style. If you find the angle awkward, just try to move your page rather than your hand. It's much easier to move a page. I'm going to start these little flicks always from the edge and just flick into the mountain. It's like you're doing quick ticks, like correcting somebody's work. We have mountain shadows. Then we can start to decide where our trees are going to be placed. So I'm going to do some trees along this horizon line. These trees are really quite straightforward to do. So I'm going to do a zoom in for you, just so you can have a nice close look. So maybe sharpen your 6B pencil and then get ready to do the trees. Okay, so I've zoomed in and I'm going to focus my trees from the road across the horizon line. So what I'm going to do first is little up and down colouring motions. So again, I'm trying to create the illusion of perspective and they disappear into the background. So these ones are just going to follow along that horizon line. It's going to be some tall, some short. Let's go all the way along. You don't want to make it too uniform. So if you have to come up and back on some of the bits you've done and to redo them to make it a little messier, do it. And I'm going to do the same in this section here, so it's not blank. So again on the road, just before the road hits the horizon line, let's start filling it in with a few more trees. Okay, so we've got our trees in the background done. So now we're going to focus on trees in the foreground. So I'm going to zoom back out again and we can start on those. Okay, so we've zoomed back out and we're ready to do trees in the foreground. So I'm going to start with a nice big tree on the left-hand side here, and it's totally fine that it goes over some of your background trees. That does not matter. All we need to do is start with a center line first. So we're going to come up, make it a little thicker at the bottom if you can, and then it gets quite thin towards the top. Then we're going to start adding some little offshoots coming off the center branch, the trunk. We can always add more if we need to. You can add as many as you like. And then I'm going to show you a close-up of the detail of the leaves in each of those. Okay, got a nice close-up here. So what we're going to do with each of these branches is we're going to colour out, and then we're going to colour slightly diagonal for each branch. The top one you can kind of colour up and around, a bit like a Christmas tree. So we start on the end, go out, and then just colour it in on diagonal till you hit the tree trunk. So up and out, and then to the side. Up and out, and then to the tree trunk. And even if you think you can't see it that great, doesn't matter, it all adds to it. If you feel like you've got any missing patches like I did, you just add them in. And the aim is to try and fill in some of the gaps. Not all of them, you still want to leave some gaps. If you want them to be really dark, you just put a bit of extra pressure on. What you want to do also is lightly shade underneath that tree. And what you're doing is creating a bit of a shadow, making it a bit more realistic. So I'm going to add a little row of trees along this area. So I'm going to start with centre lines first. And we're going to have different sizes of trees, okay? And you can pick what location you want to pop these in. I'm going to do a little one here. A few taller ones. And these ones are much easier to do. These are very different from these original trees. These are much easier. All right, these ones, all you need to do is colour outwards and upwards. Very much easy pine trees. If you wanted to do them all individual like this one, that's fine. Depends on how much of a challenge you're after. See that overlapping a bit? We've got a bunch of trees, and then of course we're going to lightly shade underneath. Otherwise there's kind of the base of the trees look a bit strange. You want them to sort of blend with your background a bit. Okay, so that's enough of the trees on the left-hand side. You don't want to overdo it. We're going to do some on the right-hand side as well. So I'm going to do a bit of a mix of both of those types of trees. And again, you can place them wherever you like. Because I want it to look like perspective, I'm starting with slightly smaller trees in the background here, and then they can become longer as I get closer down the road. So these ones I'm going to stick with the same simple pine tree method. You can leave some of the tree trunk if you want that showing, just like this guy, but completely up to you. It's all about the direction. So straight up when you come up to the center, and then we're coming back on an angle. Change the angle again so it's slightly facing downwards. Let's get a more realistic looking tree. Okay, that's our simple ones done. Okay, now we're ready for two of the trickier trees. So I'm just going to start them a bit lower down. Again, I want to go a bit thicker at the base. Not not going to do it all the way down. I'm going to leave the lower tree trunk there. So just a nice faint one there. And then I might do a smaller one in the centre here. Going to be, of course, be smaller because it's further away and not as thick as this tree trunk. We'll do some tiny little branches coming out. Colour them the same way. Okay, that's our trees done. So now we're going to focus on some grass. So I don't want the grass to be as strong as the trees. So I'm actually going to switch out my 6B and come back in with a 4B. I've got my 4B pencil here. Now, grass is the same sort of thing. So you're thinking, okay, so it's going to be really short in the background here or mid-ground, and then it's going to get a lot longer as we come down. So you can choose little areas. And what we're doing is basically little clumps of flicks. They start off quite small, come right up next to the road. And we can smudge them. If they're getting a little bit too strong, you can actually rub your smudging stick over the top and it will knock back how dark they are. A few little grass clumps under the trees. So taller and longer as you come down. You can curve some of them as well. That sometimes makes it look a little bit more realistic. Little curve flicks. And do some on the other side. Really short little flicks in the distance. And that's your grass done. So we're going to come back in to finish our road off. So we are going to need to do a bit of 2B line work in the centre of the road because of course we've got the lines that separate the left and the right hand side of the road. Again, this is perspective, so they're going to be a bit chunkier and longer as they're closer to us down the bottom of the page. And then as we go up the road and into the distance, they're going to get skinnier and shorter. So try to pick the centre and place some rectangles that are actually shaped to the road. And the hardest part is getting them to turn with the road. So they're going to get a little shorter as they come along. and you can make any corrections as you go. So again, I'm going to make them shorter, so they're quite long here and they're getting shorter and shorter and skinnier. Until you can't see them. Okay, so I'm going to come in with my 6B now, it's my 6B pencil, and I'm going to just outline that road edge just a little. A really nice sharp 6B. I'm not going to colour the road black. You can if you want to, but I feel like it takes away from the trees, so I'm just going to stick to doing a bit of outlining with the 6B. And then of course we can do some line work on the edge of our road. And again, they're going to be skinnier and shorter as they come further up the road. You can outline the centre lines if you want to. I actually don't mind using a smudging stick, or you can twist a little bit of tissue to get that little point if you don't have smudging sticks, and just smudge inside the centre lines. You can even smudge on the outside edge of the road if you'd like it to be a little bit more uniformed. It also softens up the 6B a bit. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can use your smudging stick just to smudge some of that 6B shading in the mountains if you feel like it needs a bit of softening. Use your Kneadable to clean up any edges. And if you feel like your mountains might need a little bit of highlighting, you can do that with your Kneadable or Blutack. So you just pinch your Blutack or Kneadable rubber into a bit of a knob like that. And then what we're going to do is just light wiping stripes. And little stripes of highlight. Don't have to do it everywhere, just in a few places is good. Creates a little bit of a highlight, makes it look a bit more 3D. And then of course the last thing we need to do is come in with a 2B, and you're going to write your name on it and write the year that you created it. And there you have your finished little landscape. I'll see you guys for the next lesson.